All right, welcome back to Wrestling Retold and Relive with Richie Mars. I, of course, am your humble, gracious host, Richie Mars, and I'm just gonna blue skidoo right into it, because LA Knight is a big topic that's going on within the professional wrestling fandom, and I feel like for good reason, because you see a guy who has all the tools seemingly, mic skills, capable in the ring, and people are invested in him. And you don't see him breaking through to that next level, that world title consistent level. And you see somebody like Jey Uso, who pretty much had a lot of main event stuff seemingly handed to him, even though I don't think that's fully the case, but that's what the perception is. And with those opportunities, he fell on his face. This, of course, is coming after the Saturday night's main event match with CM Punk, which has been uh, subjected to criticism, which I think is fair, where you see different spots like the neck breaker spot with Punk and Jay, where people are saying, oh, was Punk actually upset with it? Was it like a Sean Vader moment from SummerSlam in 96? I don't think I would go that far, but again, when you see performances that Jay's been having, and the thing is, Jay's have had good performances. It just depends on one who's he's in the ring with. But it's ironic that all the major performances that Jay has, it just kind of results into underwhelming matchups. Like the WrestleMania match with Gunther, that's arguably their worst match that they had together. The matchup with Punk wasn't anything really to get too excited about, but he's had good matches throughout the year with Seth Rollins, with Cody Rhodes, with Gunther all on Raw. So I feel like Jay is a great TV wrestler, but when it's a big stage, I think he kind of clams up a little bit. And a lot of people within the fandom are upset with the J push, so to speak. For me, if you've listened to the show before, I'm I was in favor of the J push just because it's something different. You want to give new guy an opportunity, and with Jay, you have this individual who his arc has been consistent for 5 years. Ever since the Bloodline story, Jay has been a consistent fixture on WWE television. And I don't think people really expected him to be. You had the Jay and Roman relationship, you had the Jay Sammy relationship, the Jay Jimmy relationship, and then you had Jay's climb for single success. And you had the Intercontinental Championship Series with Braun Breaker, which I thought was pretty good. Again, short-lived championship run, and then WWE rolled the dice, fitting because WrestleMania was in Vegas this year, and they had Jay win the Rumble, which I was fine with because, again, it's giving a guy an opportunity to sink or swim, and I think WWE is in the position where they can do that, and this is going to be a point that I'm going to address later. But you had Jay, you had Gunther. A lot of people were upset at that matchup. But again, for me, I wasn't really offended on it because, again, just give the guy the opportunity. If he sinks or swim, that's up to him. And I felt like, the match was what it was. Like, it wasn't a great match for me. And it was just okay. Nothing too hit or miss, but people were disappointed because it's Gunther and people hold Gunther in high regard for his in-ring ability, and being paired up with Jey Uso, whose in-ring ability has been questioned at points, would be very critical of his run. And his run with the world title I thought was a good run for what it was. I believe it was 58 or 59 days. Again, month and a half, nothing too strenuous, but they fit a lot of different content within that run. And I really did enjoy the story of Jay being world champion and a bunch of different guys coming at all angles just to dethrone him. You had Seth Rollins, you had CM Punk, you had Gunther, you had Logan Paul. And they did the max amount that you could do within that short amount of time in order to make Jay's run actually mean something. And of course, he dropped it, and now he's in this story arc where he's carrying the weight of being a former champion, and he's trying to figure out how to go back up to the top of the mountain again, but he's just not getting it, which led to his loss to Punk. And There are some people turning on him, I think, because his performance was underwhelming. If it's all part of the story, I don't know. I think a lot of people have different opinions on whether or not that's the case, but that's neither here nor there because Jey Uso has been given a lot of different opportunity to succeed. And I think a lot of it has to do with, of course, the storylines that he's been a part of, the Bloodline story. And that's where Jay really caught fire was because he was a sympathetic character throughout the entire thing. You could argue that Jay's had the most character development out of anybody in WWE for the past 5 years. And this is why Jay gets the opportunities he gets, even though there's a lot of similarities with him and LA Knight. With LA Knight, can he be in the main event picture? Yes. Would I like to see him in the main event picture consistently battling for the world championship? Absolutely. However, with WWE and how their business is structured, they go by storylines that we can connect throughout the show and staying power where people are invested in certain people. Because whether you like or dislike Jey Uso, a lot of people have strong opinions about him. And with LA Knight, people have strong opinions about him as well, but it's to less of a degree with Jey Uso. And again, WWE, their company, their rules. It's like that old saying, if you want to go back to the Vegas saying, the house always wins. The WWE will control who gets the opportunities. Should LA Knight be a part of that main event conversation? In my opinion, yes. And the thing is that people don't really talk about is that LA Knight is getting more consistent main event time on Raw than he was being the United States champion on SmackDown. He's more consistently on the shows. He's in major angles. He's talking the Punk. He's talking the Braun. He's talking the Jay. And he's just a consistent force where he wasn't on SmackDown. And for that, I see that as a net positive. Now, a net negative would be him losing in the main events a little bit too frequently, at least for my tastes. But at least he's in the main event. And I think what people really get upset by is LA Knight, he has all the tools, and WWE is just keeping him at a certain level. And I can understand that perspective because even though I'm a fan of LA Knight, I can also see the business perspective of what WWE is doing because WWE, at least in the main event scene, very top heavy right now. You got Roman, Cody, Punk, Roman, Brock, Drew, Randy, Cena until the end of the year, Gunther. You have all these different guys that are on the top of the card, and it's going to be hard to consistently break through that. And when you're LA Knight and you haven't had the staying power of all the names that I've just mentioned, it's going to be tough for WWE to position you like they would a Jey Uso, like they would a Roman Reigns, like they would a Cody Rhodes. And I think this is a time where LA Knight is in the Chris Jericho, Rob Van Dam position of like when Jericho was in the Attitude Era, Van Dam was in the Ruthless Aggression Era. You can believably see them in the main event picture, and at least consistently. However, WWE feels comfortable putting them just that level below where you could kind of put them in the main event, but you could kind of take them out just in case there's another program you want them in to work with somebody else from another angle. Like with Knight, it's about the Jay story. With Knight, you had him face off against Kofi, and he's at least talking about going for the world championship in a consistent manner where he's not forgetting about it. Like with Sami Zayn, there was that time where it's like he was wanting to be world champion, and then they did the United States Championship story, which turned out to be tremendously successful, in my opinion, for Sami Zayn because it got rid of the Sammy Hogan allegations, I guess. And people remembered, oh yeah, Sami Zayn is actually really good. And LA Knight, he is really good with the opportunities that he's been given. He's knocked them out of the park, and I think he's been very serviceable. However, with WWE, their train of thought is we are going to make our stars. And yeah, you're going to interact with different people that are not a part of the plan. But with Triple H and his WWE, there's always going to be a set plan to everything. Like anybody in professional wrestling, there's always going to be those guys that you are going to look at consistently as your main event guys or future main event guys. And people are going to get pushed above you in the pecking order from time to time. For every Stone Cold, Rock, Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, the chosen guys, or people that were convinced to be the chosen guys, you're going to have people that are over, but you have a more of a discussion trying to convince them that you're a top guy. And LA Knight's in that position where they see him as a valuable asset. And even though he's not in the main event, he's still bringing the company revenue, and he's still bringing the company in a spot where if the company needs him to be in the main event, he's already ready for it. And I think that's a big thing that people want to kind of detract from this current era of creative. And yeah, the creative has been uninspiring, at least for me, for some regards. But for LA Knight, it's not a problem of him not being the world champion. I always don't like when people say, oh, it's bad booking and it's because somebody didn't get a championship or somebody didn't get a push. LA Knight is getting a push. It's just not the push that you prefer. Because even though he's not world champion, he is on television consistently. He is in angles and top angles consistently when that wasn't the case before when he was on SmackDown. And it's up for WWE to capitalize on that momentum. And they're in a position, WWE is, where they are coasting and they can afford to coast because they're making money hand over fist. And honestly, with Triple H and his creative decisions, he can afford to coast until it's time to kind of like rev it up a little bit. Do I think LA Knight could easily be in the Jey Uso position and succeed? Yeah, absolutely. At the same time, there were people that at least were underwhelmed with how Triple H would portray his world champions. And for that, I kind of agree because we got more and more into the long title reigns. And I'm not sure if that's the best thing for WWE, at least storytelling wise, because there is a plan and it's a long plan, it's a long game. And people are still invested, yes, but week to week television viewers, you might not get that consistency because nothing much is happening. It's like filler shows. And the truth is with WWE, it is an ensemble show. And what an ensemble show is, everybody has their part to play. It's like Saturday Night Live. You're going to have your selected cast members. Some will be in almost all the scenes, others will be in a couple scenes, and others will be in one or two scenes. And LA Knight's in the position where, yeah, you could plug him anywhere you want, and he's a tremendous personality to have on the show. He's different from any other wrestler that you have on the show. But the reality is, the show's not always going to be based around him. And people will use the age argument, which I don't think holds any validity, because you had Damian Priest as world champion, and he's older than LA Knight. And with LA Knight, he is 43. And I think a lot of people see that it's like, oh, he's too old. But professional wrestling 10, 15 years ago, being 43 then and being 43 now is completely different. You have different recovery, you have different lifestyles, as well as LA Knight. His wrestling style isn't high risk, high reward. It's more of a safer style, but he does have moves that are very concise, that are very recognizable. You know, you have the jump up suplex, you have the jump elbow, you have the BFT, you have that torture rack, burning hammer like maneuver, you have the LA Knight elbow drop. So he has the recognizable move set. He has everything that you want in a WWE star: recognizable look, catchphrase, music, mic steals, etc. And the thing is, what people don't talk about with LA Knight and his portrayal in the world title scene is he's pretty well protected in almost every single one of his world championship matches. If you want to go down the list, you have his first world championship match, which was against Roman Reigns at Crown Jewel in 2023. And it was a standard match, nothing like too crazy, but he lost by interference. So that protected him in that regard. And then you had the Fatal 4-Way at the Rumble in 2024, where it was him, Randy Orton, AJ and Roman. And LA Knight wasn't pinned in that situation either. So he had an out on why he lost these world title matches. Fast forward again, you have the Seth Rollins World Championship match, and that was a setup for another world title match that he'd be in, but he lost by disqualification because CM Punk interfered. Then you had the Clash in Paris Fatal 4-Way match, which, again, he wasn't pinned during that matchup. So he's been pretty well protected whenever he receives a world championship match. There's always an out on why he lost, and I think that's why people truly haven't given up on LA Knight, because he hasn't been in a consistent world title program where the show's based around him as the challenger. He is a very much plug and play challenger that you can have during a world championship run, and he's an easy guy to root for. It was much like how Dean Ambrose was in 2016 when Triple H was world champion before the Roman match, where he's the guy that will get you to the program that you want. And Drew's kind of filling in that role too before the Cody Randy program, presumably. And that's not a bad position to be in. And when I say not a bad position to be in, you're getting consistent TV time, but there's always going to be drawbacks. Of course, the biggest one being you're just going to be seen as filler, and the show's not going to be revolved around you, even if it's a great program. And it's up to WWE to continue that momentum after that world title program. And I feel like with WWE, LA Knight is a guy where, again, it's very safe to put him in different positions on the card because he's always going to get a reaction. And some people find it incredible that he's still getting a hot reaction, even though his storylines have been less than stellar. I think Logan Paul, that storyline was fine for the U.S. title. And then, he wasn't on the show consistently during his reign as U.S. champion. Lost the title to Nakamura, then gained it back a couple months later. And again, just being there to fill in a spot because he gets a reaction. People are invested in him. So you don't need to put in the work and care in order to make him more than what he already is. And in my opinion, that's a missed opportunity because what I feel like has been holding LA Knight back is the lack of stories that have him as a central character. He's usually a player in other people's stories, even going back to the Bray Wyatt story. It was more of an introduction or reintroduction for Bray Wyatt and that character. Big spotlight for LA Knight, but he wasn't the focus of that story. Then you kind of focus on starting at that SummerSlam of that year when he won the Battle Royal. Then the Miz story was focusing on LA Knight. And then you had his match with Roman, which was his focus again. And then you had the AJ story, which was one of LA Knight's premier stories, I guess, as a singles competitor, where he was consistently a force on television. But then after they cooled him off, and I don't think that was the correct move. Because even though you had Cody as WWE champion, you could still have him as 1B. And they tried that with the US championship, but with Logan Paul on his schedule, you kind of chill out LA Knight, which again wasn't the right move because it's the waiting game. You have to wait for Logan Paul to be free to use LA Knight. And WWE is more comfortable doing that because it's like, oh, LA Knight's, he's over, he's fine, he's going to be okay. When I think people want to see more of LA Knight, they want to know more about this LA Knight character because a big criticism is LA Knight is a throwback to like the Attitude Era guys. I know Kevin Nash, he had that opinion, but I think he's since changed it and he really does like LA Knight because now he understands him. Because yeah, he is a throwback, but he has his own spin on it. Where it's like, yeah, he has the diction and talking pattern of The Rock, Steve Austin, all those kind of guys. But again, he puts his own little spin on it. And his improv work, I think, is really welcomed in this environment because in WWE, it's dog eat dog world. And I think for a while, it was unless you're the chosen guy, you're not going to get ahead. And that's still true to some regard in WWE and any promotion. Hypothetically, let's say it's like, oh, LA Knight defeats Punk. Then you just kind of wasted LA Knight versus CM Punk on Saturday night's main event. And now that story is not really going to progress any further because LA Knight already beat Punk. So why are we having LA Knight as champion when there's no after the fact? With CM Punk, at least you have the Braun Breaker factor. If LA Knight won, yeah, you could also have the Braun Breaker factor there, but to be honest, this world title is presented as this is going to be Braun Breaker soon enough. Do I think CM Punk's reign is going to be long? Probably not. And that's just my opinion of it. I don't think it's going to be considerably long, but with LA Knight, the second he wins the World Heavyweight Championship, a lot of people are going to be like, okay, when is this reign over? Because fans, for the most part, they want to see you rise. They want to see you get to the top of the mountain. And then once you're champion, and if the creative has nothing for you, and it just kind of is paint by numbers being the world champion, as we saw with Cody in the beginning of his run, people will be like, all right, what's he doing? Because wrestling is a what have you done for me lately kind of business. And because of that, I feel like a lot of people want what they can't have. And that's natural within life. You want what you can't have. Mom, can I have ice cream after dinner? No, but I want it. That just makes you want it even more because you have that denial. And that's very much what's happening with LA Knight. Because if LA Knight was a consistent fixture in the WWE main event scene, you're going to be under the microscope of not only the brass, but also the fans as well, as we've seen with Jey Uso. Because every single mistake, every single thing he says, it's under the microscope. And the reason why LA Knight is getting this groundswell of support is not only is he popular, but people aren't as gung ho to point out the flaws that he could potentially have. And this has happened when LA Knight earned the shot against Roman, where people are like, oh, he's not that great in the ring. He's very basic. All he does is promo work. He's kind of one dimensional as a character. And that's where the conversation is going to go if and when LA Knight becomes world champion. And then you're going to have the same people who want him to be champion. It's like, oh, he's too old. And then they see a new person that's rising up. It's like, oh, when's Braun Breaker going to be the champion, for example? And you can't base your company or your champion around people there. It's like, well, we're not sure if it's going to be a fad or not. You could argue that Jey Uso was a fad or not, but at least with Jey Uso, he was bringing in revenue despite him not being world champion, or at least with him in the main event scene, where WWE has had the data of Jey Uso consistently being a money maker and a interest with WWE fans. Because in storyline for a while, Jey was a more likable protagonist than LA Knight. LA Knight is very much a, I don't want to say niche because that's not correct, but he's a very, I don't want to say unsympathetic, but it's like he doesn't have like a sympathetic backstory. He's like tells you what's on his mind and he will achieve his goal whether you like him or not. And with Jey, it's more of we've seen this guy go through the ringer from the bloodline, from his cousin's abuse, from trying to win his singles championship, trying to prove he could do his thing on his own. It's a more gripping story in comparison to LA Knight. And I think the reason for that is because LA Knight, he hasn't had any stories where he is really that sympathetic. He's more of like, I'm going to take this shot and I'm going to be champion and I'm just going to talk smack while you do it. And a lot of people gravitate towards that because it's something different, because you can't have the emotional sob story all the time. But the fact is, the more emotional sob story are what get people invested and get people to attend these shows. And with Jey Uso, he's very interactive. And again, with Jey, he has that advantage of being a part of one of the best storylines that WWE has had come out of its company over the past couple of years. And I'm not a huge Bloodline story fan, but I understand why people are gravitated towards it, where you have WWE fans, you have Bloodline fans, and the Bloodline story is a reason why people got back into wrestling. And that can't be a coincidence why Jey is in the position that he's in now. Because yes, they rolled the dice and Jey worked out. I think his run was beneficial for WWE because again, you tried with a new main event star, but at the same time, WWE is not in the not in a rush to create more main event stars. They're going to maximize the profits that they have with the stars that are in that top crop already. Cody, Punk, Even though there are people who are like, oh, turn Cody heel. Cody's still tremendously popular. And turning him heel at this point would be a mistake because there's nobody else who could take up that mantle of white meat babyface. At least not yet. And with LA Knight, he's not much of a white meat babyface. He has more of an edge to him. So he wouldn't be that person to replace with. It's like it's trying to replace Superman with Booster Gold. You know what I mean? It just doesn't feel right. Even though The Miz would probably be a better Booster Gold than LA Knight. But I digress. Now, should WWE roll the dice and put LA Knight in the world title picture permanently, have him as world champion? I think they should, but they need to have a plan for that. What I mean by that is we've seen people who win titles just based on a whim, where it's like, oh, the fans want it, let's go with them, and then after that, we'll figure out what to do with them. And if you're not prepared for what the run is like, then it's going to be a letdown as a title reign. And we've seen positions before, and I think what people don't really notice with Triple H and his portrayal of babyface champions, they're not very strong in comparison to heel champions. And you could go back to NXT and you could see the same thing, where the babyface champions, by and large, have less than stellar runs in comparison to his heel champions because Triple H is a big NWA fan and he wants to have that perception of it's in the chase. You know, the money's in the chase. And when you have the championship, well, how are you going to be as a babyface champion? And we've seen it with Cody. It's a problem, but again, Cody's still over. So there's no real need to speed up the process of ending his run. Punk, this is his first like long world title reign I'm predicting. So there's no reason to interrupt his run yet. With LA Knight, what needs to happen with him is that he needs a consistent story arc that's going to get the fans more invested in him as a character. And his story needs to be told outright. You know, you have these story arcs with Jey, with Jimmy, with Cody, with Roman, with Punk, with Seth before he got hurt, with Drew, with Randy. That's the big thing that LA Knight is missing. He doesn't have an overarching story that goes from storyline to storyline. What I do like, even if he's not in the world title picture, is he'll continually mention the World Heavyweight Championship. And that's giving people hope that he's going to be that champion one day. Is it going to be happening? I don't know. I don't work there. But it's good that WWE now has more options on who could be a top star because a couple of years ago, that wasn't even the case. A couple of years ago, you had Roman, Brock, maybe Seth, maybe Drew. That's how it was a couple of years ago. You had the top star, and that was it. Now, within Triple H's WWE and creative, you have stars that are over within different divisions of the company. Like you have Dom Mysterio, who's over. You have an LA Knight that's over. You have a Sami Zayn that's over. You have these guys that are not necessarily main event guys, but they're over with the crowd, and the reactions for them and for their matches are pretty strong. And that's a big thing that I don't think Triple H gets enough credit, at least for this run of creative, is that he's made the middle of the card kind of mean something again when that wasn't the case. You know, he had Gunther and his Intercontinental Championship run, which has been given rave reviews. You've had some career resurgences like Sheamus. You've had new stars break out, which I think Dominic Mysterio is probably the most successful story of Triple H's creative years, just because it's one of those things where this guy, Dom, was hated for the wrong reasons. And now it's a complete 180. And now he's beloved he's a villain you love to hate. And with LA Knight, I don't think it's a case of Triple H doesn't see anything in him, because he obviously does. Because if he didn't see anything in LA Knight, period, then LA Knight would still be Max Dupree. LA Knight would still be managing models. But that's not the case. But they see him in a position where he's valuable, but The jury's still out if he's going to be top guy valuable. You or I can think he's valuable as a top guy, which I think he is. But again, it's not up to us. And the fact is, WWE can afford to play the waiting game. And WWE doesn't need to give anybody a reason on why they're not in a higher spot, even though they deserve to be at a higher spot. It's all about timing, it's all about a little bit of luck, and it's all about how the brass sees you. Point blank, if they don't see LA Knight as a top guy, they wouldn't be booking him on these shows. And to be honest, if this was a Vince McMahon run WWE and LA Knight was getting over organically, then he's not being booked on the shows every week. He's probably going to be in main event. He's probably going to be in stories where it's like just a 5-minute segment. And then after that, it's going to like try to dwindle down its heat. And then there's going to be the other option where it's Vince is like, oh, you like this? I'll show you what you really like. And then the run's going to be over and ruined. Like the new ECW. People kept chanting ECW. Vince brought it back and then stopped people chanting ECW again. Um, Vince made certain people world champion. And when they were world champion, it's like, all right, you got it. All right, now I'm going to take it away. Because that's all you want. You just wanted this person to win the championship. All right, he won the title. Now back to basics. Happened with Zack Ryder. Happened with a bunch of popular guys, and then it was taken away. With LA Knight, he's not a flash in the pan in comparison to Zack Ryder. Is LA Knight like a Dolph Ziggler? Not really, because at least with LA Knight, his verbal skills are going to continually keep him over. With Dolph, he didn't have that range that LA Knight did, at least within the vocal charisma area. Dolph is a good promo. LA Knight is a good talker while also being a good promo as well. That gets people invested when you hear him talk. Dolph, better worker than LA Knight, but LA Knight does just enough that gets him by in the way that he has a recognizable moveset, and because of that, people know what's going to happen in his matches, but he can vary it up. So he's a very diverse in-ring worker depending on who he's facing off against in the ring. Like we've seen him use his moves in different ways where people can be invested in him, like a Jacob Fatu moonsault into the BFT, like the Kofi Kingston, do the back suplex, Kofi lands on his feet, BFT. So people can be invested and are recognized to his moveset. But with Dolph, even though he was an over character, the reason why his presence diminished so greatly was because he is less of a personality than an LA Knight in terms of that vocal and verbal charisma. So I think that's where LA Knight has his advantage, and that's why he's still over to this day, because a lot of people are drawn to his personality, to his mic work, to his confidence, and I feel like that's going to carry him far, and that's why he's undeniable, and that's why his reactions haven't diminished since he got over in 2023. Because once you're over, you're pretty much set, unless the booking tells you otherwise. Now, do I think LA Knight will be world champion one day? Yes. Do I think he's going to be the center of the company? No. Because if he was the center of the company, it probably would have happened by now. And that's just reality of it. Jericho, Van Dam, Booker T, AJ Styles, all these guys, very flexible in terms of where you put them on the card. However, they were never the guy. I don't think LA Knight is going to be the guy. I think he's going to be a guy who wins the world championship. And it just is a matter of timing, luck, and if they see him in a position where he can carry the championship that goes along their plans. Because WWE now is all about long-termness, for better for worse. With Vince, it was more about, this guy is over. Okay, we'll put him on the title and then we'll give it to him for a couple months and then we'll drop it again. And it's like it never happened. Now it's all about story arcs and where we want this person to go. Like there are plans for Roman, for Cody, for Punk, for Seth before he got injured. Now it's going to be for Braun. With LA Knight, it doesn't seem like WWE has a set plan for where he is. I think probably in his future, maybe Dom Mysterio in the Intercontinental Championship. And people might say it's like, oh, it's a step backwards. And it could be. But again, you make the opportunity that you're given. Just because you're in a lesser position on the card that's not the main event doesn't mean you can't turn it into something that is valuable for the viewing audience. And for an ensemble cast, you're going to have to fill your role depending on what people see in you. And in my opinion, I think LA Knight is one of the most flexible talents you could put on anywhere in the card, whether it's IC title scene, the tag scene, or the main event scene. He's going to be fine regardless. And even though the age factor, which I don't really think is a real thing, he keeps himself in fairly good condition. I'm sure his style is a lot to do with that. And overall, I really think that LA Knight is going to rise above this kind of, like, I don't even call it a rough patch because again, he is on television consistently. Just because he's not pushed as a winner or in like the world title scene every single week, he is still on screen. He is still a consistent force on WWE Raw, which that wasn't the case on SmackDown. So I think he's going in the upward trajectory right now, but it's all about seeing where he's going into the future. And I know that the future is scary to some people because it's like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen to him, and people want everything to happen now, 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 now. I just hope that people will kind of enjoy the ride instead of being paranoid that this person didn't get the world championship by now. That means they're buried, or that means the company doesn't see anything in them. And that paranoia will go a long way for you not enjoying the product. Should LA Knight be world champion? Yes, in my opinion. But again, it's not my company. And it's up to WWE to capitalize on the momentum that LA Knight has. And they're all within their right. You know, they pay their talent and they could use them however they want, much like any other promotion. And whether they see LA Knight as a long term champion, short term champion, or even champion at all, that's their prerogative. And right now, they are utilizing him in where they feel like he's utilized best. And that is to be in the fixture of the world title scene while also being a valuable person to have on the show and interact with all the top guys, whether it's Jimmy, Jay, Punk, Bronze, like everybody. And it's going to be onward and upward. So for me, I'm just going to give the listening audience advice. Whether you take it or leave it, that's up to you. It is unclear if LA Knight is going to be world champion, if at all. But that shouldn't mean that you should stop supporting your favorites. Because even if LA Knight doesn't become world champion, that doesn't mean you can't be invested in his career. There have been several great people who have not held the world title. There's been people that are worse wrestlers that have held the world title. That doesn't validate how this person can impact professional wrestling. Roddy Piper, never world champion in WWE. Jack Swagger was a world champion in WWE. Does that mean Jack Swagger is a more valuable commodity compared to Roddy Piper? In my opinion, no. It's all about the moments and how you impact with those moments. With LA Knight, what I hope for him is having a consistent story where he has a set goal. It's a good sign that every week he says, I want the World Heavyweight Championship. Because not everyone gets that opportunity and consistently with their character. And with that, I want him to at least follow it so it's a big arc that he can finally complete. Sometimes that'll happen, sometimes that won't. But for me, I'm not going to worry about whether or not he's going to be world champion in the future. I'm worried about what's going to happen on Raw. And then after Raw's over, I'm going to be worried what happens the next week. I want to see him consistently succeed, whether he's the opening match, middle of the card, or the main event. And that's how I feel like I'm best utilizing my time with watching the product, not just analyzing, but not being like, oh, why isn't this person in this position? Because the truth is, I can't control that. Nobody can control that. And you could start a movement. You could go on social media. You could downvote or upvote anything, try to get things trending. But WWE is going to listen to WWE at this present time. There's going to be no bucking the system, getting somebody a world championship just by tweeting about it. So the only thing I could do as an LA Knight fan is to cheer him, support him, and we'll see what happens. If WWE wants to capitalize on LA Knight, that's their prerogative. If LA Knight wants to stay in WWE, that's his prerogative. If he wants to leave WWE, that's his prerogative. But all he can do is do the best what he can with the material that's given to him, and hopefully WWE capitalizes on it. I think there's enough room at the top of the card, and with LA Knight, he's more than serviceable. He's more than ready. But again, not my company, not my problem. Thank you guys so much for listening to Wrestling Retold and Relive with Richie Mars. I, of course, am Richie Mars. New episodes usually on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. At Retold Richie Mars is the Instagram handle and the TikTok. Just crossing over 18,000 on TikTok. Thank you so much for current wrestling takes. TTFN, ta-ta for now, and I'll see you next time.